Hello, my name is Marcus Crawford, um, 5316, working with Python programming. This is part two of our geochemical data experiment, PCA, k-means, and geospatial phase. In the second phase of our comprehensive geochemical analysis, we delve into a deeper testing of the two distinct archaeological data sets. This builds upon the foundational work established in part one, where preliminary statistical analysis were conducted. Here in part two, we shift our focus towards other statistical methods and geospatial techniques like principal component analysis to distill the element data into potentially more informative component rendition. And secondly, we apply k-means clustering to categorize these samples into meaningful groups based on their elemental makeup, potentially revealing something even more distinct. Finally, a spatial dimension is added to our analysis to integrate geospatial mapping. This allows us to visualize the geographical spread of the identified clusters. Again, looking at the geographic distinction of elemental composition of the church samples from Texas and the Ohio, Indiana. It is still the same data acquired from the University of Missouri research reactor. And the goal remains to better understand the elemental composition and identify any significant differences or similarities. Our datasets derived from the studies are the same. As previously stated, they're termed in both this paper or in the first part, DF1 and DF3. DF1 is the research paper on it is titled Geochemical Characterization of Tecovas and Alabate Source Samples by Michael Quigg. The other research dataset paper is titled Neutron Activation Analysis of Stone Artifacts at Paleo Crossing. And that is by Matthew T. Bollinger. Objectives with the data and the methods applied. The PCA objective is to reduce the dimensionality of the data set and identify the principal components that capture the most variance in the data. The initial step involved in preparing DF1 and DF3 for PSA included cleaning the data, handling missing values, and ensuring compatibility between two data sets. Significant challenge was encountered in missing value for zirconium, and this required careful handling to ensure consistency across for comparison of these two data sets. Effectively, the data was standardized to ensure that each element contributed equally in the analysis. If you look over here, here is the initial run through with NumPy and Matplotlib for our initial representation for PCA. Now, this is not very telling, as you can see looking at these. There's a slight variation, but the ultimate goal was to render this in something that gave us clear distinction. This image here, this graph, shows it was our first initial functional rendition of DF1, executing PSA to the data set. Subsequently, we refined it a little bit more so that it would show a clearer pattern of what its primary principal components it's picking out. And as you can see, here's iron, um, calcium, aluminium, and barium, potassium, and I'm not sure. I mean, continue to try to clean this up to pull out, I think it's nickel. Um, and Here at this point, I'm asking this to print out the list of primary principal components, and I get two distinct signatures from one another. And I kind of thought of this as potentially, if um, we verified it, it could be thought of as the fingerprint of these regional charts. This was my most cleaned up slide distinguishing these two populations using PCA. Moving on, K-means was next applied. The objective was to group the samples in each data set into clusters based on their geochemical signature. K-means clustering was applied to both data sets, DF1 and 3. The PCA results then ran on the original data set that was produced through the PCA. In other words, I got a clustering based off of the results of the data that had run through PCA. Just to give you an idea of what that looks like, here's our initial renditions and some of the different groupings of the PCA data run through K-means. That was not too indicative of anything. This is a refinement here. I called it enhanced K-means, where I am distinguishing out. Let me see if I can get this to show. Yeah, here we go. Between these two, and see if you look at these, this here has the blue as a cluster of high in barium, uranium, aluminium, calcium, and potassium. Very high for barium, calcium, aluminium, potassium, and Mn. Not sure what that is, but I have a different clustering pattern for DF3, where barium, uranium, aluminium, potassium, and zinc are here in blue and defined as moderate. The final data rendition took a more mixed approach, taking two primary PCA components, barium and uranium, as can be seen here, barium and uranium, uranium and barium, and then applying K-means to the original data set that hadn't been run through the PCA process to produce a focus on the distribution of uranium and barium. And this is what the results were. I apologize if you can't see it super clearly, but we have this graph here with this clustering, and this one over here for this grouping. Anyways, across the board, graphically, we were able to test for distinction. Now, we'll would be able to consistently get the same results if we tested the geology of these areas to one another is an unanswered question. But This is just the first step of venturing in that direction. Finally, the last phase of this project is the geospatial projection, ensuring compatibility between the two data sites for geospatial analysis was challenging. This included aligning coordinate systems, resolving any discrepancies in the geographic coordinate data, i.e. latitude and longitude. What we ultimately did was create geodata frames for both data sets, and we combined them into a single geodata frame for comparative analysis. I think this is probably the most lacking part and the most difficult part, and maybe because I made a strategic blundering decision of using this collab environment instead of utilizing ArcPy in conjunction with ArcGIS Pro to display the graphical. Regardless, I'll still walk you through. Here is the initial map, and this is just way too big. Here's an attempt of trying to look at the geospatial data and figure out what we needed to tweak in order for this to display. Anyways, this here is a map, and I know it's hard to see. These were the samples from the Texas DF1 set. DF3 did not execute, and due to a lack of time was not able to figure out why. This is using k-means, our k-means results. There's a little bit of color distinction, but they're pretty uniform. But again, I don't know how to compare this to the other data set, and sort of is an admitted blunder. Conclusion, this project adaptly integrated advanced statistical methods and geospatial analysis to enhance some understanding of the geochemical properties and spatial distribution of church samples within the two data sets. Through PCA, we effectively reduce dimensionality of the data sets, highlighting the principal components that captured the most variance. PCA also presented a challenge, particularly in interpreting the components and their relevance to forming a geochemical signature. K-means clustering revealed distinct geochemical groupings with each dataset, suggesting variation in geological sources. While the project achieved significant insights, the geographic representation could be further improved. Actually, everything could be improved, but I think it was a meaningful first step. Have a good Christmas break.